Now, it might be the end for the News of the World, but tonight this programme has new revelations from the private investigator at the heart of the hacking scandal. He says the paper decided which victims to target by committee. Glenn Mulcaire was secretly recorded on camera as he was confronted by one of his phone hacking victims and admitted that he lost his moral compass. The former head of the Metropolitan Police Anti-Corruption Unit also told Channel 4 News he was warned off investigating illegal payments to corrupt police officers. Our Home Affairs correspondent Andy Davies has been investigating the scandal with a Channel 4 dispatches team. This is their special report.
For nearly 5 years, his name has been synonymous with this scandal. Glenn Mulcaire, the former News of the World private investigator, suspected hacker of Millie Dowler's phone and thousands of others. Tonight, he's confronted by one of his alleged victims.
You can't remember who gave you my name. No, definitely not. No, multitude of thousands and millions of names across the system.
And in his first ever interview on the issue, we hear from a former anti-corruption chief who once tried to investigate journalists paying police.
It's not legal for a journalist to pay a police officer or any public official to do something that's contrary to his duty. That is corruption.
In March 2003, Rebecca Brooks had just left the News of the World to edit The Sun. She appeared before a parliamentary committee and made a startling admission.
Can I not just ask whether they ever pay the police?
Sorry?
It's just the one element of whether you ever pay the police for information.
Yeah.
We have paid the police for information in the past, and it's been...
And will you do it in the future?
It depends on...
We operate within the code and within the law, and if there's a clear public interest, then the same holds for private detectives, for subterfuge, for video bags, whatever you want to talk about.
It's illegal for police officers to receive payments?
No, we don't. As I said, within the law.
This year, Brooks was questioned again by a committee about this statement. She clarified that she was in fact just commenting on a widely held belief and had no knowledge of any specific payments. Yesterday, the head of Scotland Yard announced they would now be investigating this whole issue of police bribes and journalists. It was a dramatic development. But as Channel 4 News can reveal, the police have tried to delve into this murky world before. It was in 2003, and we know that because the man who was head of the anti-corruption unit at the time, who was investigating this, has decided to give his first ever interview on the subject.
We had lots of intelligence coming in that there were little bits of information that clearly had been leaked from our organisation. And there had been one or two slightly higher profile cases where we'd got members of the public, quite often celebrities, who had either been involved in crime or been the victims of crime. And then, you know, their names have found their way into the papers very, very quickly, you know, the following morning sort of thing. And it really could only have come from one of ours.
But only now are details emerging of just how widespread and accepted this practice was. Paul McMullen was deputy features editor at the News of the World, under the editorship of Rebecca Brooks.
As I recall, it was like 200 quid to spin a number plate so you'd know who had visited a celebrity or someone. Whereas a good story that's published over a couple of pages would be between 5,000 and 10,000.
Was it sort of accepted practice to pay the police?
Yeah.
One way of attempting to legitimise the feeding of information from officers to journalists, we understand, was to register the reporter as a confidential police source or informant. Channel 4 News has learned that at least one News of the World journalist was registered in this way and given his own code name. The journalist cannot be named for legal reasons. An attempt to prosecute him for paying a police officer for information failed. And so that brings us to the inevitable and frankly urgent question in all of this, which is, if journalists knew these illegal police payments were fairly common, if the police knew about it and were even beginning to investigate it as far back as 2003, why is it only now that Scotland Yard has finally come out publicly and said it wants to tackle this bribes issue head-on? Well, the former head of anti-corruption at the Met has revealed to us for the first time tonight how he once received a warning on this issue.
I was given what I think was very good advice at the time, that if you go for a journalist and you convict him, then that's a good job. But if he gets away with it, if you don't quite make it, there will be plenty of his colleagues who will round on the organisation and you will be punished.
The sale of police information can have devastating consequences for those whose details are passed on. As the Anti-Corruption Unit continued its investigations under Steve Roberts, in 2003 a case unfolded involving a young woman who went to the police to report a violent sexual assault. She had been attacked by a minor celebrity.
I was told if I pressed charges against this man, I'd have lifelong anonymity, and that meant that my name would never be released in connection with the case, and certainly never be printed or broadcast. If it was printed or broadcast, then the people who were responsible would go to prison.
The Crown Prosecution Service eventually dropped the case. The victim's identity should still have been protected, but Sam found herself hounded by reporters.
The press seemed to know everything about me. Certainly my name had been leaked, certainly my name. They knew where I lived, they knew where my mum lived, they knew where I went to school. They were knocking on my neighbours' doors, shouting through my letterbox, shouting sums of money through my letterbox, trying to get me to sell my story.
It was clear that someone had breached Sam's anonymity order, and details that appeared in the News of the World seemed to point to one source.
There is no way that that News of the World journalist could have got the information about me unless it was given by the police. It could only have come from my statement. Somebody had read my statement. They quoted me verbatim. It had to come from my statement or from my filmed interview.
It's contempt of court to breach an anonymity order as it is to leak details of a witness statement. Sam's name was also handed to the News of the World's investigator Glenn Mulcaire, and several attempts were subsequently made to hack into her phone.
I was quite traumatised at the time. The whole thing was quite shocking. I think I half questioned it. I kind of just thought, you know, that's what the press do. You know, they just know things, they just find things out.
Last week, Sam turned the tables on Glenn Mulcaire, tracking him down to his home and secretly recording him. When confronted, he began by talking about how tough it had been for him and his family.
I have a family of 5 kids that have been traumatised by this. And we're still trying to pick up the pieces from it. I mean, what happened years ago has been dealt with, but we're still getting the drip effect from it as well.
She then asked him whether it was a police officer who'd leaked her name to the News of the World.
That wasn't my remit, it wasn't how I operated. I didn't corrupt people, I worked with them.
How did you get my name?
I would be given instructions. My approach, again, I was a fact finder, I was an investigator, I wasn't a journalist. So.
In 2003, you worked in the office.
I can't answer that, because, again, it was by committee.
Commissioned to hack by committee, says Mulcaire. It is a significant admission which further demolishes the claim News International used to peddle that Mulcaire was effectively instructed by just one rogue reporter.
You can't remember who gave you my name?
No, definitely not. No, multitude of thousands and millions of names across the system.
Mulcaire wouldn't reveal who'd given him Sam's details, but he did admit that some of what he did for News International was morally questionable.
But hence, get orders to do the job accordingly. And it does bring into areas that are grey, and your moral compass gets a little bit misguided, isn't it?
Others are far more forthcoming. Paul McMullen told us how payments made by journalists to police officers were routed through a third party, a family member or a girlfriend, to avoid detection.
You don't just send, PC Plod, here's a cheque for 30,000 quid and he puts it in his bank account. Of course he doesn't. It's going to be, his mother's aunt or something.
McMullen insists that Rebecca Brooks was aware that payments were made to officers.
If it wasn't a significant amount, I might just put that on my expenses, £200 paid to, a police officer, and then that would go through and that would be authorised by my department boss, Rebecca Brooks at the time.
Rebecca Brooks remains in control at News International, despite numerous calls for her sacking. the appeals for inquiries, for public reckonings continue. And all the while, yet more victims come forward.
You're very vulnerable when you report sexual offences. You're scared that you won't be believed, and you cling to the fact that your name isn't going to be promoted in relation to it. If that's breached, as it was with me, and very personal details find their way into the national press, it's incredibly traumatic. You just don't know who you can trust.
And Andy Davies joins us again in the studio. Andy, where does this go from here?
Well, John, the film throws up all sorts of issues, not least that extraordinarily frank admission by a former anti-corruption chief that there was, in effect, a reluctance at the Met to take on the media. The Met is the biggest force in the country to take on the media on the issue of payments to police. Then there was Paul McMullen saying that Rebecca Brooks knew about those payments to the police. Now, she, this year, has denied knowing of any specific cases. It's worth reiterating that. But then there's the Glenn Mulcaire admissions, that he was in effect instructed by a committee, and that could potentially have huge significance.
And I gather we've heard from his lawyer.
We've got a letter, came in this afternoon. I'll read it to you. The reference to orders being received from the News of the World by a committee was an indication, he said, that information was received from a variety of different people on the news desk. The use of the word committee was a colloquial expression meaning a general group of individuals. Our client stresses there was no committee set up for the purpose of instructing him. But remember, we've never really...
Is that lawyer working for News International?
Well, as far as I'm aware, no. But, you know, we've never really ever heard Glenn Mulcaire discussing these details. Certainly in the civil actions, I'm led to believe, he's declined ever to comment on this. And here we have him on film admitting being commissioned by a group of individuals, not by one lone reporter. And a media lawyer said to me today that it was an astonishing development and could very well end up being used as evidence.
Andy Davies.